All right. Hello and welcome to the Sprint 20 report, ManageIQ Sprint 20 report. Next slide, please. The sprint just ended 2 days ago, Monday, as usual. It has been a sprint chock full of stuff, of both features and bug fixes and refactorings. This is the overview. I'll talk about the statistics. Greg and Jason will talk about the providers. Alberto will give us an update on the REST API. Dan will give us an update on where the UI is at. Greg M will give us an update on orchestration, retirement, and automate. Aaron will tell us about Rails 4 and technical debt. Joe will tell us about the work he's been doing on IPv6 and the STIG requirements, and Rich will tell us about policing updates, and John Mark will tell us about where we are in the community. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I mentioned, this sprint has been, well, really amazing. We've normally averaged, I don't know, about 120 pull requests per sprint. This sprint, we somehow doubled that capacity. I'm still trying to get an understanding of how that happened. Kind of hard to say if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It feels like a good thing, but don't know if that means we have many smaller pull requests or we're creating them faster and merging them faster. It's really, I'd really like to get an understanding of this, because knowing this will probably give us a good handle on future velocity. That's kind of what I'm trying to. So 248 pull requests merged, 112, a little less than a half, were bugs, 76, about a third, enhancements, the others technical debt, refactoring, and tests. There's currently 84 open pull requests. 27 of them are works in progress, so they're still being worked on, not really mergeable, but the other ones are all under active review. Next slide, please. All right, over to Greg B on providers.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
All right, so this sprint, we had a lot of help from our external teams. The Openstack infrastructure integration team brought us some heat stacks and images for inventory collection, and also more metrics collection, kind of tuning to better take advantage of how Ceilometer works. So big kudos to the Openstack integration team for that help. On the Kubernetes side, the container management team added the event catcher. This is really important because it kind of opens the door to automatic refreshes, as well as policies, alerts, and tying into automate. So we'll see more advances in that space coming down the line. I'm going to hand over to Jason. He's going to talk a little bit about the Foreman integration. Next slide.
Okay. So on the Foreman side, the big change that we did is more of a back-end change. We reorganized the back-end tables of managers by consolidating them into the EXE management systems. Previously, they were completely separate tables. And it was more of an experiment, or we were trying it out, and it turns out it makes it very complicated on the back end to do some of the more general code things like adding workers and credentials and things like that, credential verification. So transferred them into the EMS table, and from there, then I added verification of credentials, and we have workers now for EMS refresh on the Foreman side. Want to talk about provisioning, Greg?
Yeah, so for provisioning, we were working on a number of different things, but the stuff that got merged in the sprint were the internal state machine that will ultimately be called from the automate state machine once we get that in place. There was a lot of work to refactor the current workflows to support the new provisioning dialogues we need for Foreman. And then we were doing research around organizations and locations to include that, which we'll need to be able to properly align hosts with available host groups. It's part of provisioning. Things that are basically working now, but not in the point where we merge them, where we have the dialogue created, we have the workflow running, we're creating a request out of that. So those things are well, pretty far along. The next step is to, obviously, once we get those merged, create the tasks and tie those to the Automate state machine and ultimately to the internal state machine we have here. So that stuff's moving along quite well.
So in addition, because of the reorganization of the back-end tables, the Foreman managers are now kind of merged into the other manager code. So reporting may appear broken. For example, if you have the configuration manager on the Foreman side, it's going to say that it has resource pools possibly, which is kind of weird. So I'll be looking at that at the next sprint, but it's sort of a known issue right now. Another to-do on the list is scheduling of Ems refreshes. There's no events on the Foreman side, so we need something to kick it off. So we'll be putting in the timer-based refresh. So that has to be added as well, and that'll be in the next sprint, hopefully. And I believe that's it for me. So back to you, Greg.
All right. So Matthew Draper has put together a little video describing the progress on provider plugins. Marianne, if you want to go ahead and kick it off. And then you'll have to enable sound as well.
Marianne, we can't hear anything.
I think you have to unmute your mic, no?
Yep. Something.
Primarily, you can see I've renamed manager classes.
Anything?
EMS VMware here.
Better.
Are you now?
Can you restart it?
Yeah, turn up the sound and start it from scratch. And thank you.
So I've been renaming pretty much all of the EMS-related classes in order to reduce some inter-class magic, tidy up the models directory, and pave the way for extraction of individual providers from the main repository. So primarily, you can see I've renamed manager classes. EMS VMware here is now namespaced, or structure to its name. Looking at some other models within VMware, you can see that not all of the current names are consistent in their
Well, sound again.
which is the number of letters in the word template. In comparison, we're just asking the manager for the corresponding VM model. In another instance, this one's even worse. Instead of string manipulation, each subclass is forced to define the method itself. Whereas here you can see we now define it once on the base manager and it just works everywhere. So if we look at one of these class names, the first part creates a namespace based around the provider. This gives us a single place in the object hierarchy where everything specific to VMware can live. Lining everything up in one place makes it obvious how to create a new provider, and also what parts are candidates for extraction to an external gem. The module name creates a natural gem name. Within the provider's namespace, we have another layer, which is the manager. The specific merits of the provider manager split are out of scope here because that's work that's occurring separately in parallel. But within the rename, we're able to neatly contain several managers within one provider's namespace. So our default example being Openstack, which has both a cloud manager and an infra manager. As we proceed to move providers into GEMS as Rails engines, we'll be able to better identify dependencies of those providers, and we'll also open up the ability for external teams to adopt or create providers and maintain them entirely outside our tree. In terms of timing, we currently have an in-progress PR for VMware. That's mostly waiting until after we branch the next release because of the potential instability it could introduce. Other providers should be able to be renamed shortly thereafter. Then we'll move on to the actual separation and extraction, because at this stage we're just rearranging in tree.
Thank you, Matthew.
And that's it. Next slide. So if we have any questions about the provider plugin stuff, you can sidebar them in the chat or hold them to the end at the question and answer section at the end. So I want to talk a little bit about what's next for the provider space. We're looking at getting the event catcher done for the OpenStack infrastructure side. That's well underway. We have a couple little bugs to work out there, but I think that'll come in really early this next sprint. The integration team is also working on connecting the OpenStack infrastructure providers to the OpenStack cloud providers. This has some really interesting side effects or notions coming from it, where one of them is the third point, which is auto scaling, where you get too many nodes on one host, you can spin up a new host. This is something they're working on right now through Automate. I'm really excited to see this. They've shown me some early demos of it. It's really cool. I'm really excited to see it on the next sprint. And then with Kubernetes, we're starting to expand out to OpenShift. OpenShift v3, which is the Red Hat's PaaS solution built on top of Kubernetes. OpenShift adds a lot of really useful functionality to Kubernetes, so it'll be exciting to pull these features into the management world with ManageIQ. And that's it. Next slide.
So the other thing that I wanted to add is that for Kubernetes, we just merged this last night a pull request that adds the UI skeleton for Kubernetes. So people who take a nightly build will be able to see the containers tab. So I'm really excited about that as well. So there's more kind of going on to Kubernetes than expanding to OpenShift. And on the Foreman side, the expectation is that at the end of the sprint, we'll have most of the Foreman, both backend and UI, together, and hopefully we'll have in the next sprint demo, a really solid Foreman demonstration that we could show to everyone. Alrighty, next slide, over to Alberto.
Okay, so let's talk about the REST API front here. It's been quite a bit of activity from merging all the work and as well as new development. So I'll just go down through the list here. So what got merged is from VM management, adding events to VMs as well as triggering scans. So that got merged in. Policy management, supporting the policies and policy profiles as subcollections, as well as querying actions on them. So those two got merged. Querying policy events as a subcollection, API policy ID events here. Also assignments, management of policies and policy profiles to the collections, VM templates, providers, hosts, resource pools, and clusters. So that's in. And lately, the old VM RSOP ability from the SOAP got reworked, and we are providing that as a resolve action. and that can be triggered on both policies and policy profiles, but we also enable it for both VMs and templates. So that puppy's in. So the good news is with all these merges, we now have parity with the SOAP API. Next slide, please. Okay, so additional work. Let's see, we did an enhancement to the token manager. Previously, if you're requesting a token upon authentication, that was only valid if you have a single worker process working on the providing the rest. So not a good thing. So now you can have multiple workers, and that's honored across. Performance enhancements, it was dismal when we introduced the virtual attribute support. That went pretty bad. As you can see, just querying 500 VMs with a name attribute was up to 32 seconds, and 1,000 basically timed out the request. So that stuff got improved back to respective data down to 1.4 and 2.4 seconds. So we're happy with that. Also, we merged in a security fix. So the SQL filter parameter that was allowed in 1.0 is now replaced with filter, and there's some instruction on how to use that. So that's in. We also are exposing 3 additional collections and their flavors, security groups, and availability zones. That's also merged in. And that's it for me. Yeah.
Next slide, please. Over to Dan.
Okay, so we've got 3 major items in to this sprint. One is the console support, which is using HTML5, VNC, or Spice technologies to access Rev or VMware VMs. We also got the initial UI plugin support, which is basically allows you to add menu items either to the main navigation area or up to the top right, and provide we'll provide an iframe to kick off a URL, so you can embed other tool, web access, or any kind of web page. And we have demos for these first 2 that are coming up. And we got some orchestration UI updates. I think Greg M's going to talk about that along with his other orchestration backend stuff. And we just finished off the last few views that were being changed to convert it to HAML, and got their I18N strings put in. So that's all. That project is completely done. So the next screen is really just to show that we have a couple demos. I'm going to try to kick those off, and Martin is going to speak over them. Let me get that ready. Oh, I got to share my screen. Hang on. This one, and this one. Okay, and Martin, whenever you're ready, let me know.
Yeah, we can go.
Okay, there we go. So this is the console.
So basically what I'm showing here is example of opening the web console. We have 2 types of consoles. One is implementing the VNC protocol, and the other one is implementing Spice protocol. In Revm we have both of these. So here you can see the console opens. It's a third-party code that implements the protocols in JavaScript using HTML canvas. So as you can see, we have successfully opened the console to Windows virtual machine, and we got the Spice console, as you can see in the title. And now we are opening a VNC console. We are acquiring the ticket for the console, opening it, and we have WebSocket proxy that's proxying the TCP data from the Spice implementation to the client. So you can see access to a Linux virtual machine using VNC. And also here is a short demonstration that we can also work in Internet Explorer, which has some, let's say, unique features that you need to count on when working with it. So we somehow work in Internet Explorer. Just a sec. Yeah, and we have a Spice console running in Internet Explorer connecting to a Windows virtual machine.
What are the
last part of the demo is actually showing that we can use SSL for the connection between the server and the web browser. We are using WebSocket with SSL. There are some issues with configuration here. So far we only support this through some configuration keys. Here, as you can see, we have WebSocket here, encrypt to true, and we have to specify the certificate and the key. And now we should be able to open the console to SSL, but the prerequisite is that you need those certificates to be accepted by the browser.
I have a question for you. What are the manager or the infrastructure manager requirements? Do we have to set anything on the VMs in Rev? Like
maybe wait till, Kevin, can you maybe wait till the end of the demo?
No.
Oh yeah,
no,
sorry.
You don't. You basically ManageIQ asks for a ticket through the RevM API. So ManageIQ instructs RevM to create a ticket to create the access. It just uses the default technology that's configured on the VM, either Spice or VNC.
That's marvelous. Thank
My
you.
understanding, Spice is the default, but I'm not an expert on RevM.
Okay. Now you can ask more questions.
Well, also there's a secure regime of the communication between the proxy and the backend RevM, and we also support that. Well, we don't configure that. We just use the defaults. We just read from the ticket what's configured on the RevM site and either use encrypted or non-encrypted connection. So that's it from me.
Any other questions on the consoles?
We will work on enabling Amazon Web, Amazon EC2 support for. Oh, sorry, not Amazon. We will work on OpenStack support for the consoles.
Right, that's coming next sprint. We're hoping.
So that's it from me. Any questions?
No, next time let's save questions till the end of the presentation if we can. Thanks.
Yeah, so here's another presentation that Martin's going to talk about, which is the UI plugins. You ready, Martin?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let me get this going.
So I have started by creating some entities that represent the menu items. It was in the previous sprint, and in this sprint, I have added a simple way to define menu items. As you can see here, we have the default menu items. We have two menus, the main menu and the top right menu, with some sections and menu items. And here in the terminal, I will drop a couple of files in the appropriate place. It's on the product menu bar. I will just copy some files here with the definitions of the menu items. Now I need to reload the web UI worker. So I'm doing it here. After we are reloaded, we will see what happens. Hopefully we will see new menu items added. Okay, so we have to reload in the browser. We have done that, and you see that we have a new menu section in the main menu called Red Hat, and we have two items in it: Red Hat homepage and courses. So now we can add two types of menu items. We can add the system type menu items that lead to stuff that's already implemented in ManageIQ, and we can add menu items that lead to external resources. These are implemented through iframe. So this is just for integration of products that don't run under CFME, but can run on the same appliance or even externally. And now I'm creating another custom menu section in the top right. Again, I need to restore the web worker. And as you will see, we'll have a new section as we reload in the top right corner.
Oh.
Here it is, CNN, okay, we can click. What's new? Okay, and the last bit, you can see that this integrates with the airbag stuff that we have under configuration. Because we need to honor the airbag system that we have in the application. So if you go under roles, for example, administrator, you can see that the new sections are being added here also. So you can specify who has access to these. This also has to be done by the potential plugin. I will show the directory where you can define the new features and default features for roles. It's under DB fixtures, ManageIQ product features. It contains two new sets of features for the one menu section and for the other one. So the plugins can be implemented as packages, for example, RPM packages that will simply drop the files into the appropriate places, and it will become part of the UI of ManageIQ. Also, we need to, here you can see that the super administrator by default has access to the Red Hat menu. That was the definition. And the last bit, there's some doc for the QE or someone else who would like to play with this at this URL so far. So you can read some documentation on how to create a plugin. That's it from me. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
All right,
Thanks,
that's it.
Martin. Over to Greg M.
You can grab back the slides for the presentation.
All right.
So in this sprint, number of items done around orchestration. In the last sprint, we showed more of the insight stuff around templates. So in this sprint, we enabled, or the UI enabled actions around the templates to be able to edit, copy, remove. And we have kind of two videos showing that as well as the provisioning. The back end, we added support for validation of the content of the templates as well, which was missing, but that's not in the UI in this sprint release. So we'll get to that. As far as provisioning, this is the first sprint where we have, I want to say, really full end-to-end provisioning available. The service catalog item is available. The one thing, the default state machine is provided through Automate. The one thing that's missing right now in the UI is being able to build the service dialog based on the input parameters defined in the template. So we can do that through the Rails console, but we're still working on getting that provided in the UI right now. But so in the demo, we show that dialog's kind of been created by hand, but somebody, we could help people produce that. But the UI, the back end is all working for that. So if Marianne, if you can give Bill access to share his screen, we'll run through two videos showing these two features.
So the first one, I'm going to show the template operation. So here we are at under surface. Service and catalog and orchestration template. So here we list all templates, some templates are marked not read-only because this template has no stack associated with them. And other templates are read-only if some templates, some stacks are already generated based on this one. And for read-only template, we can only modify name or description. Like this one, I change the description and I save it and succeed. And for that read or writable templates, and I can edit. We can edit the content. So in this test, I slightly modify the description and save the key. And we are able to save it. And we can also copy the template. So here, like I slightly rename the name and try to save it. And then we hit a arrow because we are not allowed. We are constrained that the content to be unique, so we don't allow the content without modification. So I try again, and this time first I rename it, and then I slightly modify the description again. So make some change to the content, and I save again, and this time I succeed. Okay. For the not read-only templates, we can also delete them from our DB. So once we delete it, immediately get removed from the panel. So this ends the first part of the demo. And my second demo is the provisioning. Okay. And the orchestration provisioning also is on the Surface catalog. And here, first I will start to create a new catalog item. So from configuration, we can add a new Surface catalog item. There is a new type called orchestration. And then just give a name called demo. And add this item to existing catalog. And choose the pre-generated dialog. And select an orchestration template and also provider. So for the entry point, we already add a new orchestration provisioning state machine under ManageIQ Cloud namespace. So we can save this new catalog item and ready to order the service. So once we order a service, we provide a stack name called demo_1 and fill in necessary parameters. And I try to save it. And it has an error because we have a validation of the stack name. It does not allow an underscore. So I remove the underscore, and then I'm ready to order it. So once we reload the status showing it is running, while we are waiting for it to complete, we can go to the stacks to see that the new stack called demo1 is not in current list. So we'll come back to the request, wait it until finish. Now it's finished. We can go back to the stacks and see now demo1 is added to our database. And we click into it and it shows the details and of that stack. And here, for example, there is one instance included in this stack, and this is the instance. This concludes the demo.
The one thing I want to point out in the dialog, the validation that failed is actually derived from the input parameters defined in the template itself. So that underscore requirement is actually defined as part of the template of the, part of the template. Right? So when we generate the dialog, we carry those validations along.
Very cool.
So in this sprint, we merged in enhanced retirement, which is something that has been worked on for a while, and Tina and Madhu were able to bring it to completion here. Disappear for everybody.
Yeah.
And the slides went away on the.
Mary Ann, where are the slides?
Is everybody seeing the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. No. There you go. All right. So I'll read through here, but the goal of this was to provide an out-of-the-box retirement state machine that can be easily modified and customized. In the PR, the description has a great write-up about the changes in more detail. People can go to, but the one thing that the user experience is the same. You retire VMs the same way they can be retired now, or VMs or services. It can be timed, it can be retired now, so that the user experience doesn't really change. What we were trying to do was take some of the internal logic and expose it to the Automate state machine to allow people to get in between and do more customizations as required, as well as help track the flow of the retirement as well. So the old logic, I have a workflow on the next screen that I'll run through, but used a lot of internal processing, immediately marked whatever object is retired before it even started going through any kind of workflow. And for VMs, required policy to be able to hit automate. So now everything is pretty much jumps right into the Automate state machine, and there is no policy required. So the big things to note are that before getting into Automate, it was driven off a VM retire or service retire event. So now there's a request event that gets generated, and we've added a retirement state column to VMs and services to track if it's successful or error, or if it had initiated retirement but hadn't finished yet. So we go to the next screen. Next slide. So the old workflow, like I said, it would set the retirement flag, raise the event, the audit event, and power off the VM in this case. So that all would happen before anybody ever got the ability to control something within a state machine. And then you could call it to automate if you had policy configured for that. Obviously, you need to do things before the power off. There was no way to get in between or to control other things that you want to do here. So in the new workflow, we raise the request event. That immediately takes us into Automate, to where we start the retirement process and mark the item as being in the process of retiring. And then the pre-retirement step, which I think used to be called power off, check power off, pretty much now splits based on the vendor type. For infrastructure only, power, shutting down a VM worked well. Cloud, that isn't always possible. So now we split on vendor type, similar to what we did prior with the placement for provisioning. And now we handle each provider separately, and it's all done in Automate, so that can be customized further as well. And then you have steps in the state machine to do other customizations if you need to. Examples we have in there for states are similar to what we had in the old state machine of releasing MAC addresses or IPs, DNS work, stuff like that. And then removing the object from the provider and ultimately finishing the retirement, which is now actually marking it as retired instead of up front and doing things like raising audit events. This new workflow really enables some of the other things that people used to do on a more common basis, which are things like starting retirement and in the middle of the state machine hibernating for a number of days before actually deleting the object. having that flag to say that it's in the middle of retiring allows the state machine to wake up after a certain period of time, say, a number of days, and see that the machine has been unretired and understand that it needs to, drop out of this current state machine logic, things that were difficult to do before. So having these extra flags, having everything available within the Automate workflow really starts to enable more customizations.
Cool.
Yep, so the one thing we're working on that I know the PR has a little bit of a write-up about people being able to integrate their old workflows with the new concept or the new setup. So we're also working on a kind of a more thorough document to help people
migrate, basically.
Yeah, migrate and use their old workflows and what they need to do to support that.
Awesome.
Next.
Greg, two questions, Greg, about that, if I can ask.
Yep.
Sure.
First of all, does that mean when you raise the event that we'll actually see something in the request queue in regards to the retirement state machine, or is that still just kind of doing its own thing in the background?
No, it's just still in the background.
Okay, and then the second question is, when you raise the event, is there a way to tell who triggered the event? In other words, was it a timed event? Did somebody hit the button that said retire now? So I have a user object. Because one of the things that people have asked in the field is, for example, if the end user retires now, they don't want to wait for a grace period. They just want it to go away.
Sure.
And today it's hard to tell or determine who's triggering the retirement based on the event that comes in, because you lose obviously the currently logged in user and all that. So I was just curious if we'd be able to tell who initiated the event.
Yeah, I don't know that off the top of my head, but that's actually a good thing to look into. I can definitely see the use case for that. So
I've got a BZ. I can give you the BZ.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah,
Kevin, let's sync up after this, and we'll track that.
Okay.
Not a problem.
Thanks.
Yep. All right, so I just wanted to point out, we're trying to get more stuff exposed to Automate. So these were a number of cloud-based objects that were not exposed that we had requests for. So went through and exposed a lot of these things. I think the only one not really cloud-related was the disk object under Cloud Volume, which is just exposed. It's one of the subclasses used under Volume. So all these are now accessible from Automate scripts.
Cloud Object Store Container, that has nothing to do with Kubernetes, right? That's just a cloud thing.
Right.
Okay.
Next slide. And then the continued service dialog work adds the date control in this sprint that you can set that through dynamic methods through Automate. And we're working on this Git issue, which was open in this sprint to start supporting read-only fields. This really kind of serves two use cases. One is once people start using the orchestration templates and we derive service dialogues from the defined templates, a service designer may not want someone to be able to modify every field that's defined within that template. So they have the option to set it and mark it read-only so that it's visible but not modifiable by the person ordering the service, as well as we don't have any kind of static dialogues today, and there have been some requests for like text fields where we just display fields that they need in the UI. So this kind of serves both those purposes. We're working through to be able to set all the fields as read-only within the service dialogues.
Cool.
Hopefully we'll have that soon.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Thanks for the summary. All right, over to Aaron. Next slide, please.
Sure, yes. So this sprint I've mostly been working on, I've been working on doing Rails 4 upgrade stuff, but this is kind of tangential to the work. Essentially, we have a lot of places that are tightly integrated, I guess you might say, with Rails, and I'm trying to remove those things, which is essentially removing technical debt from the application. So a lot of the pull requests I sent this sprint were mostly refactoring, adding tests, and just deleting or changing code around. And one of the examples, probably the biggest example, is removing usage of Access AR model. Access AR model was essentially a way for us to have classes that acted like active record, but weren't necessarily backed by database tables. And it turns out that a lot of those classes actually are backed by database tables. They're just maybe internal Postgres database tables. So essentially what I was doing is converting those to regular active record models and then removing that code. The reason we don't want to have that code is because it essentially duplicates a lot of the functionality of Rails active record. But unfortunately, since Rails has changed APIs, the APIs have steadily moved forward. The Access AR model API hasn't moved forward in parity, which means that we can't use it in a lot of places where we would use new stuff. Other than that, mostly performance improvements and isolating the application from Rails. I mean, most of the tests and when I say isolating the app from Rails, what I mean is just removing those spots where we're using Rails internals. So a lot of these things are only fixing, like, I think we're down to maybe 50 failing tests or so on the Rails 4 branch. But unfortunately, like, none of them are very common failures. So in order to fix one, it may take me, maybe a day or two to do that one particular test. And fixing that one test means removing technical debt and adding new specs to surround that. So if you look at most of the pull requests I sent this sprint, they're adding tests and refactoring code and maybe fixing one or two Rails 4 tests. That's pretty much all I've been. Oh, actually, yes. One big point that I want to mention is most of the failures that I found are with regard to, or this sprint, most of the failures I found are with regard to the code assuming that we're doing eager loading of associations. So what that means is when you do model, user dot somethings, the code will assume that somethings has all been loaded into the databases and actually is in memory at that point. And that isn't true in Rails 4. It is true in Rails 3. So, for example, one of the tests that I fixed the other day was like, okay, we're going to delete some records from that collection and then save that off later. And in Rails 4, it turns out when you do that delete, it actually deletes it from the database, where in Rails 3, it would just delete it from memory at first. So just finding spots like that and cleaning those up. And unfortunately, those are extremely difficult to find because when you look at the code, it just looks like, we're just accessing this association. You may not necessarily know that method call is an association versus just a method call on a regular object. So it's very hard to just look at the code and say like, oh, that's a spot. So that's mostly what I've been working on this sprint.
Cool.
Not super exciting, but
that's very important.
Yes. So
right, over to Joe.
Okay, so from the IPv6 front, some of these are mostly tangential to the actual support for IPv6, but now to get to that level, we're going to be using the hostname column on both the hosts and providers to do all communication. So we've already had some fallout with some issues that have happened for a few different people working on different areas. So we still have to work on the UI and how that's going to actually look when you edit the host or provider and kind of specify how to connect to it. In addition, a lot of the upstream work with the REST client gem used for communicating with Revim and Overt has already been merged, but now we actually are using that version in ManageIQ. So we can now communicate using IPv6 literals. One note that I ran into is that the IP6 tables by default blocks 443, so I had to make sure I manually opened it on the revm or overt side. And while I was testing that, I noticed that our discovery work was indicating our own appliances were actually revm or overt, which was wrong. So there was some work to try to find a better API to better isolate which one's actually revm over and not be so generic in our request. So that was done also in related to IPv6. Next slide. On the state side, which is more of like locking down some of the requirements for the government, some of the issues were that our IP tables was blocking most of these ports for example, the Rails server, but also Memcache. But we still were listening on all addresses locally on the appliance. So that's what was done in this first bullet. In addition, we were starting and stopping Apache regardless of whether the roles that needed Apache were actually running. So now when all of the UI workers and web service workers stop, Apache will also stop. And then I'm not sure if Alberto has any.
Yeah, I could just talk about that. So the other requirement is to allow when enabling LDAP is to allow authentication via the SAM account name from AD. So in the UI, you'll see when you select the user type, you'll see SAM account name. So this way you can log in using, for example, the domain prefix, / account name, or that'll be the default. Or if you're trusted via another forest, you can enter the alternate domain for that in the main login screen. So that stuff got merged upstream.
Awesome. All right.
And that's it.
Thanks, Joe. Turning it over to Rich.
Recently, we found some issues where in the field we noticed that newer distributions of Linux have moved away from the old init process definition and management systems to something called systemd, which has a different way of defining the processes involved and how they're initiated and things like that, and we just weren't detecting it. So while it didn't cause a failure, we would basically, after fleecing, not see any init procs information or system processes information for those Linux systems. So this sprint, we addressed that, and we now collect the data for these systemd-based init procs, and
the system has detected that a minimum number of lines are connected to this conference. Do you want to continue your meeting? Press 1 to confirm. If there is no response,
and where the data
conference will
overlaps
end.
with the existing information, we currently do display that information in the UI. There is new information involved available for the systemd init procs, but that will require changes to the user interface before we be able to see those. However, that information is in the database currently. Mo Morrissey, who implemented this, will now give us a demo and return over screen control to Mo.
Yeah, good morning. Well, thanks. I'll keep this short. I know how everyone loves long meetings. So without further ado, can you see my screen? All right, great. Perfect. So quickest fleece in the world, but this is a fleecing process run against a systemd VM without the systemd code enabled. So as Rich said, the systemd, modern Linux systems have been moved over to systemd for services and firewall management and interface management. So, without the our systemd logic, the current code only detects the old init proc services. Systemd will work with those, but obviously most services have been moved over to the new interface. So you can see that the output is very limited here. So quick spiral wipe later. You have the now code running the systemd logic. We run another fleece. And here you can see that all of the systemd services are there. Right now this is only detecting services and targets, which are what run levels have been previously converted over to. But systemd has support for a lot more system configuration. So, in the future we could go in through systemd, detect firewall rules or detect interface configuration or what have you. So none of that's there, but it's just in the realm of possibility. So that's it for me. Back to whoever.
Thanks, Mo. Okay, now we turn it over to Rich. You have anything else?
Yeah, I just want to mention that we have still works in progress implementing fleecing support for SCVM and Openstack instances, and that's ongoing, and hopefully they'll deliver to a sprint.
Near you? Very good.
That's it.
Okay. Turning it over to John Mark, who will update us on the community.
Hey guys, this will be very short, but we are looking at, for the next release cycle, for the C release cycle, which we're going to vote on a name real soon now, we're looking at May 7th and 8th. Those are tentative dates for an online design summit. So we'll be requesting topics real soon. So please get yours in order and submit some blueprints, and we'll have some instructions on how to do that. We have a redlined agreement going back and forth with the developers that are going to be working on the next version of the extensions depot. That should be, it's in the approval queue. Hopefully we'll get that, we get final approval this week so we can get the actual development started. We have the first document pull request that's going to be part of the new workflow, and this is a workflow where we'll have documents in the upstream, and then they'll contribute to the downstream process as well. But we have the first pull request. Now we have to work out the finer points of how the workflow will actually work. But feel free to take a look. It looks nice. It'll be good to get these ASCII doc-based documents into the website. And get the community process going around that. And then finally, whenever you want to check out what's happening in the community, there is a regularly updated Trello board. This is where you'll see all the things that we're working on at any time. And that's it.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. So the next sprint demo is going to be on April 1st, April Fool's Day. We will actually have a sprint demo then. And
we'll implement everything.
All bugs are closed.
And with that, I want to say thank you to all the presenters, and thank you to all the people who contributed to the sprint. As I said at the outset, a record number of pull requests merged, and really a healthy and vibrant developer community on ManageIQ. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions and comments. Okay. Well, if there are none, once again,
Kevin,
thank you to everyone.
Nothing?
Right. What was
that? I said Kevin has nothing?
Uh-oh.
I already got my questions in.
All right, guys. So with that, I thank everyone, and look forward to doing this again in 3 weeks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.